Serious late night hikers, what is the creepiest thing you have seen while hiking? I'm copying and pasting this over from an older AskReddit post which asked a similar question. I used to often spend my summers bouldering with my friends by a relatively large forest that was about an hour and a half away from where I used to live. We used to spend some of the nights camping out there just to save some travel costs and time. Anyway, I think this was roughly like the third or fourth time we were out there camping. My friend had left all her climbing gear and her rucksack just outside her tent, or we definitely think she did anyway. The next morning we found her boots, a few clothes, and all her chalk powder had disappeared. We figured that it could have been completely feasible that she misplaced it. Although we were quite sure that they were next to her tent, we didn't really want to believe that they were stolen. Anyway, we didn't read too much into this and just stupidly said to ourselves that perhaps she had left it by the boulders and some animal took an interest to it. I know it sounds stupid, but it was very reasonable to us at the time. Anyway, fast forward a year, we are at the same spot as usual, sitting by the tents and chilling after having some food. Mind you, it's pitch black out and only the camp area is lit by the fire. I go somewhere a bit out of sight for a slash, and what do I see? A dude in a full-on ghillie suit laying on his stomach looking right towards our campsite. I kinda stood there frozen as this dude clocks that I've seen him, and he just bolts it out of there. I don't know whether the event of the year prior was related to the ghillie guy, but this definitely has stuck to all of us. We haven't been back there since, which is a damn shame. Not hiking so much as car camping, but we were way the frick out there in the middle of nowhere on BLM land in Colorado. We drove for an hour and a half down a Forest Service road and didn't see another soul. You could see headlights and hear cars from miles away from our campsite. It's not like somebody could have snuck up unnoticed. We had 3 cars with us and 8 people. Just got done eating dinner, cleaned up, it was getting dark, so we went back to the cars real quick before hitting our tents for the night. Somebody had slashed the front right tire on each of the 3 cars with what appeared to be a box cutter. Everyone thought it was a prank, but it became very apparent very quickly that it wasn't. All of us were beyond spooked, like panicking, scary to watch spooked. We all had spares, and one dude had a gun, so we threw on our donuts while that guy literally guarded us and got the hell out of there. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Just knowing there was some person probably watching us, maybe wanting to harm us, makes me feel physically ill to this day. Edit. Well, this blew up. To answer some questions, this was south of Gypsum, and it was 100% not private land. This was a marked Forest Service road in an area with dispersed camping I had visited several times before. There were 3 guys and 5 girls. The guys were all together cooking the whole time leading up to us discovering the tires being slashed. These people are my best friends, and this would be wildly uncharacteristic of any of them. For those wondering how we didn't hear it, our cars were parked 30 yards away from our fire/tents, and a car coming down a road is easy to pick out from the sounds of nature. A gentle hissing gets lost in the wind. We heard it as soon as we started walking up. The tires were slashed on the exact same spot on the sidewall. It would be almost impossible for something on the road to puncture the tires like that. Also, there was no cell service. We called the cops and ranger as soon as we got back to the highway, told them exactly what FS road we were on, and gave them coordinates, but there isn't a lot for them to do. Cop told us it was good we were packing, and to be careful out there. I go out for walks very late at night fairly often, so I've seen a few things. The creepiest though happened about 2 months ago. I left the house around 1:30 AM, and it started off as a normal walk. I wandered around the town till about 2 AM, when I decided to go home. I was walking back the route I had came when I noticed a black van meander down the street. Didn't really pay too much attention to it though at first. I did pay attention though when I saw it slowly drive by me for a second time. I wasn't entirely sure it was the same van though, so I just continued walking, but this time I kept an eye out. And lo and fricking behold, about 10 minutes later, the same damn black van came down the street again. This time I knew for sure because it didn't have license plates. Now I was fairly scared, so I picked my pace up a little bit. When the van came around again this time, it stopped in the middle of the road a few houses in front of me. I stopped, turned around, and booked it back in the other direction. I made a few turns onto different roads, and then ran right into someone's yard. I waited behind their fence, and the same freaking van came down the street. I assumed that, when they couldn't find me, they finally decided to fuck off. But I waited in that yard for about 20 minutes, before I ran back to my house and practically threw myself through my bedroom window. Not so much hiking as walking home after work one night a lot of years ago. I normally got off around 7 PM and my walks home were uneventful. However, this night I covered a half shift for someone and worked until 11 PM. There was a trail behind some train tracks I would take home to avoid walking beside traffic and whatnot. I came to realize that night those trails were a lot different at 11 PM than they were at 7 PM. I happened across a guy who was laying by his bike moaning in pain. It didn't sound like real moaning, more like a kid's fake "I have a tummy and can't go to school" moan. I also noticed his bike was standing up on its kickstand. It didn't make sense to me. He would set his bike up properly, only to fall to the ground in pain. He saw me and called out to me for help, but I kept walking and turned to make my way back up towards the street. As I turn, I suddenly hear some shuffling around, and the previously hurt gentleman yells at me, "I'm gonna kill you, motherfricker." He hops on his bike and starts rushing towards me. At this point, I'm most of the way up the incline going towards the railroad tracks that ran parallel to the street. I haul ass up there, and as I get over the tracks, my would-be assailant proceeds to hit the tracks with his front tire and flips over his handlebars, hitting the ground hard. He is now moaning in pain for real, and makes genuine calls for help. I used a payphone at a gas station to call the cops and explain what happened. They get there, and the officer explains to me this guy's a village idiot who does this shit to rob people, and it's not the first time they had to pick his ass up after he biffed on a bike trying to rob someone. I told the officer he threatened to kill me and he laughed. Dude wasn't even armed, and apparently has had his ass kicked more times than he can count using that little line of his. Not on a trail, but walking my dog late at night. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. My dog rang her bell and I begrudgingly got up to take her outside. When she wants to pee in the middle of the night I don't take her very far, just in our side yard. I took a flashlight with me in case she decided to poo, so I could pick it up. I'm standing there waiting for her to do her thing. She is doing the doggy walk in a circle thing. Then all of a sudden the dog gets spooked and whips around. Out of the corner of my eye I see this chick just standing there. I didn't see her walk up. I didn't hear her walk up. I just see her standing there super still. Based on her position, she had to have come from between my house and my neighbor's house. Which is odd, because behind our house is back up to a green belt. It is probably 40 degrees outside and this lady, about 20, is in super short shorts and a t-shirt. I looked at her, told her she scared me, and she mumbled something like, "Nice night, what are you up to?" Standing there holding the leash with my dog, I said, "I'm walking my dog." Then she said, "Cool, cool. Do you know how to get into my house? I locked myself out." Pointing to my neighbor's house. Now, I'm a good American. I know my neighbors, and this wasn't my neighbor, who is a single 30-year-old female. She hangs out with my wife, so I know her really well. So I asked her, "That house?" Pointing directly at my neighbor's house. She nodded. I said, "You don't live there. I know who lives there." She just scoffed and wandered her way into my backyard. I followed her, said, "What the hell are you doing?" She then took off running, scaled my fence, which item of note, it isn't an easy fence to scale. It is a deer fence. It is a see-through fence that goes up 3 feet with cattle gate. Then the top of the fence is stainless steel wire that runs horizontally. It is the type of thing that, if you weren't expecting it, you'd easily trip over as it is extremely hard to see, and not very common. Anyways, she scales the fence and ran away into the green belt. I always have a pocket knife on me and was fortunate enough to have my, unfortunately, useless dog. So I looked around my house, neighbor's house for other people, shined my light in the green belt, and nothing. I have no idea how she wound up back there, what she was doing, what she intended to do, but she scared the ever-living crap out of me. It was in the summer around dusk, and I was camping at a remote campground with my dad. There was a lake right next to the grounds and my dad and I would trail blase through the forest right next to the lake, because if you went far enough there was a really pretty waterfall. A few strange things happened on this hike. We found a slash pile that had a little kid's shoe on top. When we came to a small clearing, my dad had to take a leak to he faced one side of the clearing and I faced the other, and we both clearly heard a child say, "I'm over here." My dad thought it was me, and when he realized it wasn't, we spent half an hour looking for someone, but we found nobody. After that, we gave up on going to the waterfall and started to make our way back to camp, but there were clear sounds of something following us, twigs snapping, bushes shaking. We haven't been camping there since. Probably too late for this thread, but I love telling this story because it's just so bizarre, so here we go. When I was very little, like 5 or 6, my dad used to take me on all sorts of adventures through nature, especially when we owned a little cottage up in the Scottish Highlands. Now, my dad is sort of a combo Irish bloke plus Yorkshire laddie type of fellow and very spry, despite his being about 55 at the time, and on this particular occasion, had decided we were going to go hiking way up into the cliffs. I was quite happy with this development as it meant a piggyback ride for at least 90% of the difficult bits. This was a proper trek. He wanted to get to one of the highest bluffs, so we could have an amazing 360-degree view of the gorgeous meadows and some sparkling sea. But after we reached the top plains, where it's all short wind-whipped grass and you can see 4 miles, he suddenly turned very still and very quiet. When you're small, your parents are God, so seeing your dad look frightened is scarier than anything your own mind can come up with. So I was pulling on his arm and going, What? My mum is epileptic, and I saw her fits when I was a kid, so I thought it was happening to him too, or something similar, and I wouldn't know what to do, because we're up on this huge cliff and no one is around, when just as fast as he started it, he snapped out of it. Fireman lifted me right up and just started striding away without a word. Over his shoulder, I could see a big pale yellow object stuck into the ground like an obelisk. I know now that it was a refrigerator. When I was older and I asked my dad about it, he stiffened up and told me that when he was a boy in the 50s, he and his little friends had found an old style fridge in the woods, and being little boys, they opened it. Well, of course, they had found a body, another child, who by whichever means had found themselves in the fridge and unable to get out. My dad has never mentioned a gender, which leads me to believe he either witnessed a very decomposed or skeletonized individual, but I can't ask him. Remember that episode of The Simpsons where they unlock Homer's PTSD, and it turns out he found a dead body when he was a teenager. My dad grew increasingly uncomfortable the first time we saw that episode, and had excused himself to the kitchen before the ending. My dad has seen some gnarly crap, but for whatever reason he will not discuss anything further about this dead child in the fridge, only that it happened. So when he explained, I assumed it was a trauma, and I said something like, "Oh dad, that's awful. So when you saw the fridge up there, it brought up the old memories?" And he honestly looked at me with his big blue eyes, like I was an idiot. I'll never forget it. "No, Amy," he said in a very low tone. "It was because it was the same fridge." Clarification edit. I was a little girl, so there was no chance my dad was going to open the fridge while I was right there, and also possibly relive the experience of seeing whatever a mummified corpse inside a fridge looks like. No, I don't believe it was the same fridge. It literally would have had to traverse an ocean, but I believe my dad believes that it was. Most likely it was a very similar make or model, and the sight of it just surprised him and sent him west. Someone pointed out it should have been reported just in case. I have absolutely no doubts that he did, but he's in his 70s now, so I don't intend on asking. I guess if you're ever up in the cliffs of the Isle of Skye, just keep your eyes peeled for a big beige fridge. I go hiking in the woods that permeate my town, sometimes so late that I get to see the sun rise out there. The strangest thing I ever saw was what I could only describe as a shanty town was built up seemingly overnight deep into the woods. Simple little hovels made of scrap metal and bed sheets and a small fire pit that someone had made out of an old tire, with the fire still burning. But that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was that this was well past midnight when I found this place, and it was quiet as a grave. There was no one there. Someone made the trouble of getting a fire going and then left it. From the look of it, this place could hold about a dozen or so people, and yet there was nothing there but the fire they abandoned and whatever possessions they had left in the shanties. Years ago, before we got married, my wife and I went to a local state park with a picnic and a hammock. We set the hammock up in the woods, enjoyed our picnic, then fell asleep together in the hammock. I was abruptly awakened by my wife. She motioned for me to be quiet. The sun had set. There was still a hint of light in the sky, but we couldn't see anything meaningful in the woods. My wife beckoned me to listen. Complete silence. Then, the snap of a branch in the distance. More silence. We were both suddenly very on edge. We whispered to one another, trying to figure out if someone was sneaking up on us. The silence was broken again. Another branch. Same direction but closer. Then, from another direction, a momentary crunch of leaves. Now, we were terrified. We both had pocket knives on us. Small but better than nothing. We also had a flashlight. We drew our knives and deliberated whether whatever was out there knew our location. We decided to keep the light off, lest we give away our exact location. Maybe we could run for the car. More steps, in rapid succession, coming directly toward us. Then silence again. My wife had enough. "We know you frickers are out there," she yelled. Silence for an eternity, and then another crunch of leaves. We had enough. We prepared ourselves as best we could for a fight, then shined the flashlight into the darkness, toward the last noise we had heard. 3 deer scampered away, into the darkness. We sheepishly gathered our things, and left without incident. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content.